Okay, this is part 16 of my basic Python game engine programming tutorial series. And in this lesson, we're going to take a look at switching the scenes through code. And well, you're going to be surprised how easy this is. But so really the previous lesson was the really important lesson because you saw how the object names got thrown off. And in fact, there's a chance that your names in your file that you were looking at may not have been named .002, whereas I have these now changed back to .001 because I had had a couple of extra scenes in there earlier. So, but I'm sure you would have figured it out because when you clicked on your object, yours would have been named something like, well, in this case, this is yours could have been named cube.001 instead of cube.002 like I was showing in the other lesson. But I'm sure you figured that out. But now in this case, let's go and continue. And all I've done now is I'll go back to scene 1, and to change it around, down in here where I'm using the left mouse click here, we'll just go full screen for a second. For the left mouse, when I'm checking for that, here we're adding a projectile to the scene. Oh, I'm not looking at the right file, I gotta look at cube object. Close. I'm still doing the same thing. Alright, left mouse, adding the projectile to the scene to the empty projectile location, adding the target, and then right here, this is the only code that you really need. It used to be different in the old ways. You used to have to get the actuator that you had in the scene and all that kind of stuff. But now just scene.replace and the name of the scene, scene 2. That's it. It's really straightforward. In fact, there's well, I'll be doing a lesson here in the near future on replacing meshes as well, because that's a powerful little tool, because within the game engine you can't modify the points of the mesh dynamically within the game, but you can replace the entire mesh as you go. So they keep getting better and better in the code. Now I haven't spent a whole lot of time on the Python game engine tutorials because I've kind of been laying low until I see just how well the bullet physics get implemented into the regular Blender environment. So then everything's tied together. So when I see, and then if that becomes the case, and it seems to be maybe more fully developed, then instead of doing Blender game engine type code like that, we'll have to switch back to BPY type Python code. But I have a whole playlist of tutorials for that kind of Python as well. They're just Blender Python tutorials, and I would recommend getting used to that type of Blender Python programming as well, because I will be switching back to that for sure, and I'll be spending more time on that in the near future, kind of depending on how well the bullet physics gets implemented, or when it gets implemented and released. So in this case, I have this one command in here to replace the scene, and you'll notice also in here, if I go back into the game logic here, I no longer have that switch scene where I was using the S key before and switching between the two. I don't have that in there anymore, or there it is there. That was the one I was using. I was using the plane. I took that out, so I no longer can press the S key to do it. Don't need to do it. I can just switch it in within the code. And doing it within the code is actually really what you want, because then you can do, in this case, I'm switching based on a left mouse button click instead of pressing the M on the keyboard. Well, that's not so much different, but why not just do it based on, say, I'm going to the cylinder object. And in the cylinder object, what we're doing for collision, well, I could just switch it there, right? Because that's really what you want. You want when something occurs in your scene, then it activates. But so, in fact, maybe we'll do that also. But so then in scene 2, I did the same thing on this object in scene 2, and then using this scene 2 object here, I have this same thing down here in the same left mouse button, scene.replace, and I named it scene 1. That's it. So I'll go full screen, press P, A key still shoots it, and then the left mouse will shoot it, but it switches scenes immediately. Then the A key still switches it, left mouse switches back. So I just keep pressing that left mouse button, and I'm switching scenes back and forth like that. Alright, so well, since we're at it, let's just see how fast we could actually do this. Replace scene 1. Alright, so the cylinder object, I haven't actually made a new cylinder object based on the second scene, so here I will. I'll just copy this. I'll create this as just kind of a little practice. cylinder object scene 2. Now we shouldn't have to change the name of the cylinder object like we did in the previous lesson with the other objects, because you'll see here in a second. Alright, so I'll put this in. I just noticed it right there, because the cylinder object here, when I was applying a force to the cylinder object with this or with a collision, the cylinder object is based up here. I'm using it for the container owner itself. I didn't actually grab a separate object from the scene and assign it a name. So that can actually stay the same right there. So in here, check for collision. We're saying if the collision is positive, so in that case, yeah, well, positive means it's going to rotate, but we're just going to override that here and just, whoops, don't want to do that. Alright, I'll go back and get my, one other thing we have to do, we're in scene 2, we need to change this though in the game logic. Game logic, make sure it's looking at cylinder object scene 2 instead. Alright, then I'm going to go back into scene 1 into the scripting, and then I'll go get the cube object, this one here where I was replacing it. So scene 2, I want to replace, and I'm going to see if I can just within the cylinder object, oh, I actually have a typo in there, but I'm going to fix that here in a second. So collision, this is if the cylinder collides with the plane, I'm going to replace the scene with scene 2, and with the other cylinder object scene, which I'm actually going to fix right here. See how that little typo of that semicolon in there like that. Alright, and then in scene 2 I'm going to change that back to scene 1. So it's going to, theoretically, without even me clicking the mouse, anytime that, as soon as that thing hits the scene, it won't even have a chance to rotate. It's just going to flip it back to the other one. I'll save that for a second and see what happens. Alright, I'm going to start. Let's see what happens. Yep, see, there it goes. It just automatically switches the scene on us. I'm not even clicking. Of course, I could click and switch it, and it still switches. I'm clicking. Alright, so easy enough. Alright, well, I guess, yeah, that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson.